Okay, before we have our quiet time, let's all get on the same page. If you're in the Sparkly book, it's page 228, beginning with the section, The Denial of God. If you're in the second edition, it's page 189, again, the section beginning The Denial of God. In the first edition, that section begins on page 175. And if you're in the JCIM, that section begins on page 95. Okay. Let's take a few moments to be quiet together. Okay. Good evening. And welcome to everyone who's joining us on the internet. You know, if there's one thing that should be becoming ever clearer as we proceed through the course, it's how inextricably intertwined each of you are with each other. You can't be in the dream alone, and you can't wake up and be alone. What you see about a brother is what you believe about yourself. It's really impossible for you to have a sense of another that is better than your sense of yourself. Because you see what you're looking with. In other words, I'm going to put it this way. Whether you're experiencing a dream, a fantasy, or whether you're experiencing reality, you are experiencing a singularity. You can't get outside of the singularity of God. You can't get outside the singularity of reality. As a result, if you imagine that you are outside of the singularity governs your experience absolutely. And so your illusions are bound to the same laws that reality is. Again, if you were awake at this very moment, you would be experiencing everyone and everything as it is, as it truly is. Every aspect of creation would be this is not a good choice of words, but would be colored by the purity of your vision. Your experience of it would be absolutely consistent with the purity of your vision. Likewise, if you are engaging in fantasies, and you are honoring and believing your fantasies, then all of the kingdom of heaven and everyone in it that you see will be absolutely consistent with the lens you're looking through. I will say the impurity of your vision. This is just another way of saying you are neither behind the point of perfection nor advancing toward it. You are at that point and must understand yourself therefrom. If you're already the Christ, if you are already exactly what God is being right there where you are, but you're choosing to interpret it, the conscious experience of being, as something other than that, you will, by virtue of the law of being, find everything you're looking at absolutely colored by, affected by, consistent with whatever the distortions are that you are embodying and identifying as you, yet yourself, and your mind. You're already embodying your Christhood right now poorly. Why do I keep harping on this? Because it's got to register with you sooner or later that right now you are the ultimate, behaving as though you're not ultimate. And your ultimate hood is not off in the future after you die. And you must get this point so that you will begin to behave differently right here, right now. Because until you behave differently, you will not see differently. Whether you die 100,000 more times or seem to. You will not get into nirvana. You will not get into the kingdom of heaven until you choose to behave differently. Use your mind differently. Be differently. So right here and right now is the place to have your curiosity that I keep talking about, and your experiences with your brother or your sister, your fellow man, is the place to begin to be differently. We've been talking about the God of sickness. And let's remain clear of what the God of sickness is. The God of sickness is a capacity you think you have to decide which God is real. God himself, or the likenesses you have made up in place of God, which you think you have a capacity to ordain with ultimatehood. A God that equals God himself. What are the gods you've made up? The definitions of each other and of yourself and of everything. The definitions you have made up about everything that are different from what they really are. The images, the likenesses that you have made up in your mind are not really the God you're serving. The God you're serving is this imagined capacity that you think you have to make up images and then decide you are going to call them something different from what they are, something different from God. Remember this. The God of sickness is this so-called capacity you think you have to make up images and likenesses and serve them instead of God. It's a capacity that you don't have, but you imagine you have it, and you have imagined multi-layered definitions that support and boost your faith in this so-called capacity. It's important to remember this. If you see another or you see yourself sick, it isn't the disease that is the God that's trying to control. That's not the God of disease, and the disease is not a God. It is your supposed capacity to see something there that God is not being. So let's lighten up a little bit. Let's just say you look at your neighbor or your friend or your mate and you see a human being. And your experience with that human being is ordinary, run-of-the-mill, an everyday experience. It certainly is not a holy experience. There is not a tone or a ring of divinity, of ultimacy to it. Well, there you are, experiencing your definition of that one, in place of what that one really is, which is the presence of God. Every interaction, every sighting of another person is supposed to be awesome. Why? Because you are the Christ with the real capacity to see the Christ or God in your brother. And so is your brother. God, experiencing God, is an awesome experience. I told my disciples, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. And I've said before to you, if you have seen your brother, you have seen the Father. If you're not seeing the Father, something is wrong. And all that's wrong is that you are bowing down to this capacity you think you have to see something other than God right there, where God is the only thing going on. And as a result, you don't have a wholesome, satisfying, joyful experience. It's an experience of potential threat. It's an experience of vulnerability. It's hell. So, if you are inextricably intertwined with your brother and sister, then it's with your brother and sister and every single thing in your experience that you are called upon to look at with new eyes. Because the willingness to look at it with new eyes, instead of your previously developed definitions, is what allows the light bulb to go on, the aha to occur, the insight, the revelation to happen. And until it happens, no matter how many times you, quote, die, unquote, nothing will change. So, all of you stand at the threshold of insight and new vision. And you should be utilizing your experiences with each other and with your world for the express purpose of having this new vision. Okay, let's go to the book. The section heading is The Denial of God. The rituals of the god of sickness are strange and very demanding. Joy is never permitted, for depression is the sign of allegiance to him. Depression means that you have forsworn God. Withdrawn your allegiance, withdrawn your commitment. Gotten your bill of divorcement. Men are afraid of blasphemy, but they do not know what it means. They do not realize that to deny God is to deny their own identity. And in this sense, the wages of sin is death. The sense is very literal. Denial of capital L life perceives its opposite, as all forms of denial replace what is with what is not. When you create a new definition for something, it is an act of denial of God. You're saying, I prefer, in place of what God is being there, and in place of my conscious experience of what God is being there, to see something else and give my attention and my commitment to it. Every single definition or concept you have made up or come to, I'm going to say ignorantly, is a denial of God, because it is something you are putting in place of God, in place of what the real thing is that you've created the new definition about. And your definition stands between you and God. Now this is important. No one can really do this, and you should read that not as an admonishment, but as something funny. No one can really do this. You should smile and feel the smile toward yourself when you realize that you cannot really do this, but that you can think you can and believe you have is beyond dispute. Just because you think you can, and just because you think you have, doesn't mean you can or have. In thinking that you can, and thinking that you have, you are imagining that nothing was something. That when you did nothing, you did something. You accomplished something. And see, that's where the hooker is. When you think you have accomplished the creation of something that God didn't make, that gives you an egotistical hit, a high. And like a drug, you become addicted to it. But you have become addicted to an empty act. an act that was not an act at all. And that's why the best description of your present sense of things is insanity. Because you think you've done something that you haven't done. And you are committed to continuing in that perspective. Continuing, do not forget, however, that to deny God will inevitably result in projection, and you will believe that others, and not yourself, have done this to you. Why? Why is that automatic? Because nobody ever sat down and thought, well, I'm going to blame everybody else. It's automatic because the moment you have looked at God and said what you were looking at was something else, not God, you acted apparently independently of God and lost the experience of your identity. And in that experience of loss of identity, you automatically feel vulnerable. If you don't know who you are at a complete loss for understanding anything truly. And in that state of vulnerability, you cannot help but look at all the definitions you made and see them as untrustworthy. Because after all, look what created them. Something that has no identity. Something that doesn't know what he or she is. And so you immediately find yourself at odds with everything and experience the necessity of defense against it. Continuing, you will receive the message you give because it is the message you want. Now, I'm going to split a hair here. It says you will receive the message you give because it is the message you want. This does not mean that the message that you receive after having given it is what you want. It means that you want to be in a position of giving a message. You want to be in a position of authority. You want to be in a position of being able to make a definition. Not realizing that in wanting to be in that position, you will end up receiving back what you're giving because you always get to keep what you give away. Your definitions, whatever they are wrong. Because you've made a very concerted effort to have that definition be different from what God is being. Else it wouldn't be your definition. You wouldn't be able to take credit for it. You wouldn't be able to create an imagined experience of authority that was successful in its enactment. So you want to be able to do that. You want to be able to have your definition and give it. So, you will receive the message you give because it is the message you want, and I'm going to add, to give. It's not the message you want to receive. You complain highly when you receive the message back. But it's the message you want to give. Because if you don't exercise some form of proactive authority, there's nothing for you to take credit for, and thus substantiate for yourself some sort of actual identity. And you see, everything you're going to do once having gotten your divorce from the father will be for the purpose of asserting and developing an identity, because you're at a total loss when it comes to experiencing what your identity is. That's the first order of the day for one who's gotten a divorce from the father, to establish his or her identity. Continuing, you may believe that you judge your brothers by the messages they give you, but you have judged them by the message you give to them. Well, what message did you give them? Well, if you have a definition of them and you're behaving toward them according to the definition you have, you're sending a message to them that they're not the presence of God. They are what you have determined them to be. Such an insulting thing to do. They are less than the presence of God. Not only that, they aren't even who they think they are who you think they are. It's the height of arrogance. And yet at the bottom line, it's one of those non-acts. An act, an empty act. Nothing is happening. But you think it is, and your brother thinks it is, and the two of you who don't exist, the egos that aren't really there, get into a fight, a disagreement, a contest, a fight over who has the most authority. And all the time this is going on, nothing is going on. But you think it is. And it's not your birthright to be having this dream. Again, you may believe that you judge your brothers by the messages they give you, but you have judged them by the message you give to them. Do not attribute your denial of joy to them, or you cannot see the spark in them that could bring joy to you. Now, maybe they do think they're an ego, just like you think you're an ego. But your belief and their belief don't change the fact. They just cause you to be in a fog. And so the light in them is still there, even though it's dimmed to them and dimmed to you, so that it seems only to be a spark. But the spark is the light itself. And if you want to start waking up, you've got to be more interested in seeing the spark in them and knowing that the spark is in you and being willing to look from the spark in you, which doesn't rely on any of the definitions you've made up. And this is the way you begin to undo the vast, complex experience of nothingness that you've been caught in.